I spoke to the president-elect this morning. He said, keep going, keep fighting. Behind you all the way.
Joining us now for more on the confirmation process is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. Senator Whitehouse is chair of the Senate Budget Committee and member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Thank you very much for joining us. I know you're a Democrat, but what is your sense of where the Hegseth nomination stands?
It seems to be pretty troubled. Things keep coming out, everything from, his mother's warning about him to continued evidence of multiple very serious drunken episodes. And I think for senators who might think of voting for him, they are one drunken episode with him as Secretary of Defense away from having a lot to answer for, given that his problems are now so widely known.
It's not just the reporting about the drinking or the sexual impropriety or the mismanagement of money that's out there. I'm just curious what you think about things that he's himself written and put that out there in the public. He's written a number of books, and one of them he asks, should we follow the Geneva Conventions? What if we treated the enemy the way they treated us? Would that not be an incentive for the other side to reconsider their barbarism? Aren't we just better off winning our wars according to our own rules? I mean, these are things that he's written and put in books. And he talks also about the enemy from within. This was detailed by Carlos Lozada at the Washington Post, or the New York Times, and other places as well. He also talks about the enemy within being Democrats, radical leftists. There are things that he's said publicly on the record that I wonder do they give you or your Republican colleagues cause for concern about the direction he'd want to take the military?
I mean, they obviously do. Those are highly abnormal things to say from someone who's looking for high office with grave responsibilities. So he's going to have a lot to answer for, and we'll see whether this even gets to a hearing.
A lot of this is drowning out some of the other more controversial picks. Kash Patel, one of them, Tulsi Gabbard, another. What is your sense of them?
I think there are going to be some very, very serious questions asked of Mr. Patel. His enemies list and what he's threatened to do to individual named people is, I think, going to be pretty hard to explain. And if the concerns about Ms. Gabbard's connections with Syria and Russia and other places lead our key intelligence allies, particularly the so-called Five Eyes, to withhold cooperation with our intelligence services because they don't trust her not to leak their key assets to the Russians, that would be a very significant blow to national security. That's something the Intelligence Committee is going to have to look at. That's on them. But they're the ones with the access, and I trust that committee to do a sincere job of looking into her background.
Well, say that Donald Trump doesn't go for the FBI vetting of his nominees, doesn't do one for Tulsi Gabbard, doesn't do one for Kash Patel. Are there tools within the Senate to get that sort of information, maybe not through the FBI, but to gather it themselves in the Intelligence Committee, as you were suggesting?
There may be records within the Intelligence Committee of activities that she engaged in that caused intelligence oversight to engage, but I don't know if that's the case. So I really couldn't tell you. It is possible for an American citizen to pop up on our own intelligence services screens, and it's also possible for them to turn up on foreign intelligence screens. And our allies, I think, would want to share with us the information, if they had it, about a potential candidate for DNI who had grave enough security issues that they would be reluctant to share evidence in the way that we've grown accustomed to.
You're right now a member of the Judiciary Committee. You've been very outspoken on the need for an ethics code of conduct for the Supreme Court, one that they are required to abide by. The Supreme Court has met internally. They've come up with their own code of conduct, their own ethics code, but it's not binding. How do you feel about that?
It doesn't work if it's not binding. I mean, there are really basic things that they can do, like have an inbox for ethics complaints and have a review to pick out the serious ones from the frivolous ones. and have fact-finding about the serious ones to make sure that people know what the facts actually are, and then to compare those facts to the rules, to the ethics rules, so that there's a determination whether they went outside the guardrails or not. That's all quite simple, obvious stuff. And as my recent report showed, 50 for 50. Every single one of our states in their sovereign state capacity, running their own state Supreme Courts, have figured a way through this. So when Chief Justice Roberts complains that there are, serious separation of powers concerns here, or there are dangers of lower court judges having to handle the administrative function of policing the ethics of highest court judges, all that is bunk. All that has been resolved in every single other state, and there are plenty of models that they could go to. They seem not to want to. And when I say they seem not to want to, it seems like there's a very small number of justices who seem to not want to. At least two of the liberal judges have already said, yeah, let's do this.
What do you think needs to, or what could happen in order to enforce this? Do you need your Republican colleagues in the Senate and the House to get on board with a bill to require a binding code of ethics for the Supreme Court? And even if you did pass that and the president signed it, would the Supreme Court accept it?
Well, I think there are several avenues. One would be passing my Supreme Court ethics bill, but that's not going to happen in this upcoming Congress, given the political layout. The second would be investigative work by the House, which can issue subpoenas that can't be filibustered, that looks really hard into the mess at the Supreme Court and forces through what's revealed action by the court. The third would be the Judicial Conference, which is the body of judges that oversees the judiciary. And they're looking at a lot of these questions themselves, and pretty skeptically, by the way, because they know what the rules are, and they know that the conduct of these justices does not align with the rules. And the last is just continued public pressure and a decision by the Chief Justice to say, you know what, if we can take away women's rights by a majority, then we ought to be able to decide our own ethics by a majority. And I'm not going to hold out for unanimity. I'm going to put a serious ethics code with basic fact finding to a vote, and majority wins.
All right, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.